So today I'm joined by Dr. Mike Twyman. We met, I think, 2 years ago in Italy at a networking event by a very good friend of ours, and we actually started talking about different topics, and then we ended up discussing health and biohacking, and then I sort of understood that we have a lot of in common. So Mike is not just like a usual cardiologist. He's a guy who can give you some really badass advice when it comes to health and heart disease and biohacking. So he's somebody who actually has tried a lot of things on himself, and he's right now learning and biohacking just as we speak. So, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where do you currently do your practice, and what's your day like? What's your day job like?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me for this opportunity to discuss cardiology and biohacking today. But my name is Mike Twyman. I'm a board-certified cardiologist. I'm currently in St. Louis, Missouri. I did all my cardiovascular training at St. Louis University, and I took a few years off to do some internal medicine for the Navy before I did this cardiovascular training. And then when I came back to the training, I initially thought I was going to do interventional cardiology, where you're mostly doing procedures such as coronary stents. But in my third year of training, I started to read a little bit more about preventative cardiology. Fortunately, I've not had any major medical problems myself. My wife had some allergy issues and some issues with some gluten sensitivity, and I started reading some books about that, and then kind of fell down the rabbit hole of saying, well, I'd rather look at the root cause of why people are developing heart disease versus fixing the end-stage parts of it. So I came out of my training in 2012, board certified as a general cardiologist. But my outpatient focus is trying to really work with patients to prevent their cardiovascular disease from beginning in the first place, or if they've had it once, try to have it so that they don't have it a second time.
Usually, when people come to see you, what's their health like? Usually, do they already have some serious problems, or do they just come and visit you just as a regular checkup?
Sure, it's kind of two different types of patients come to see me. There's, the kind of the general cardiology patients that come who already had a heart attack, had a stroke, maybe they're having heart racing sensations. And so I still do my general cardiology stuff with these patients. But if the patient comes to me and they're more interested in prevention, or they've tried some conventional therapies and it's not working well for them, I at least have kind of a functional medicine, integrative medicine background as well, that I can help those patients with.
So what do you think, why it's so important to teach people about healthy lifestyle? Why is it just, it's easier to prescribe something and just, send them on the road and then they'll be back?
Sure. That's, kind of the unfortunate aspect of conventional medicine sometimes, is that, it's the quick fix, and it's a quick pill, a quick procedure, but you're never really getting to the root cause of why that disease is coming there in the first place. You're just kind of putting band-aids on things. And I kind of got tired of that aspect where, I don't like using the word Humpty Dumpty, but once Humpty Dumpty's broken, it's a lot harder to put him back together than prevent him from falling off the wall in the first place. In my conventional training, I can't remember any experience in nutrition training or exercise physiology. It was mostly, I taught myself this over the past couple of years once I got out of my traditional cardiovascular training.
They say it's about 2 hours of nutrition that they get in medical school, or is it true?
It's probably about average. I honestly, don't even remember the lecture, but it's probably just basics. These are the vitamins, and this is a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat. 1 or 2 hour lecture.
So in your experience and in your opinion, and based on what you've been reading, what are the main causes of cardiovascular problems?
Sure. I learned this from Dr. Mark Houston when I was doing some advanced cardiovascular training a couple years ago. There's probably 300 to 400 things that can cause heart disease. It's not just high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, obesity, but it's typically one of three things that ends up causing the cardiovascular disease. It's either inflammation, oxidative stress, or autoimmune dysregulation. So one of those three things ends up damaging the arteries.
Okay, so autoimmune dysregulation, this is something interesting for me.
Sure.
I'm a person with MS, so anybody who's listening to that, you should know. That's the reason why I've been doing my biohacks and why I've been interested in health. So is there like an autoimmune disease that it's affecting the heart as well?
It's more that the heart is kind of the innocent bystander. Whatever sets off the autoimmunity, be it gluten or your toxic light environment, your body starts kind of attacking itself, and as these chemicals flow through the blood system, the blood vessels in the heart are kind of potentially getting damaged. There's the kind of bystanders.
So you mentioned light. First of all, maybe we should tell people, why are you wearing those blue blockers?
Sure, and this is, I think you were going to ask me the question later, is what got me into biohacking. It was that year ago or so that I was taking a trip over to Asia, and it was going to be a 14-hour flight. And I was trying to figure out, what's the best way to deal with the potential jet lag. And then I come upon many articles, from some of them from Dave Asprey, about mitigating your light environment may help with how fast you can recover from jet lag. So I purchased a set of the blue blocking glasses. I wore them on the plane faithfully, and then when I got over to Thailand, I really felt a whole lot better than I could have imagined after a 14-hour flight. So that was kind of my introduction to biohacking.
Yeah, I have about 5 or 6 pairs of different blue blockers in my house. So these are actually also with this blue blocking, reflecting cover. But yeah, right now it's sunshine outside, so I don't really need to block that much. But yeah, before I go to bed, I usually put on the complete blue blockers, which won't let blue through at all. So it has helped me quite a bit to restore my sleep. I had huge problems with sleep. Actually, I think right now I'm thinking there are 4 main aspects that I fixed, and then I fixed the sleep. First, I think I started to block the lights. I started to just dim the lights, and I was wearing those glasses. The next step for me was, after I was doing some online consults with Dr. Jack Cruz, he told me to go outdoors first thing in the morning. So that kind of sets the circadian clock. So this was something that I did, and then I improved my sleep a lot. And then a supplement, magnesium, is something that has helped me. And the fourth thing is working out. So whenever I do some serious lifting and exercise, then I just sleep like a baby. So tonight I slept really well because yesterday I had a leg day in a gym. So I was lifting some super heavy weights, for me, because this might not be very heavy for someone else. But coming back to the heart disease, so what would be the best biomarkers if you go to a doctor, or if you just want to know your overall health status? What would be the best biomarkers to check? I know that usually if you go to a doctor, you see the cholesterol, total cholesterol, and then in Estonia at least you can see the HDL and LDL, and that's it. And maybe sometimes they check the highly sensitive CRP as well, the inflammation marker. But I don't know if the doctors here in Estonia even connect it to a heart disease. It's more like a liver, or just an overall inflammation, which it is. But But yeah, what's your opinion? What would be like the best biomarkers to follow in order to diagnose or just to follow the heart disease prevention?
Sure, and this is one of my areas of expertise in my outpatient practice, is having patients come in, doing an advanced lipid profile, and kind of going through it and figuring out what is their true risk of cardiovascular disease. Say earlier, inflammation is one of the major drivers of cardiovascular disease. If your arteries are inflamed, they're more likely to be getting damaged. And there's multiple inflammation markers that you can check, but some of the most common ones are, as you mentioned, that highly sensitive CRP. That's a substance made in the liver. Another one I frequently check is called myeloperoxidase. That's something that's in the white blood cells. If the myeloperoxidase levels are high, it indicates that your arteries are actively inflamed. But one way I use the myeloperoxidase is if it's elevated, it's a good marker for your HDL's functionality. And we'll come back a little bit later about talking about different things with cholesterol, but it's a good marker. And then Lp(PLA2), or also known as the plaque test, that's an enzyme that's specific to plaque that's already in one of your arteries. You have 60,000 miles of blood vessels. If the Lp(PLA2) is elevated, it means your blood vessels are inflamed, and you're at a 2 to 3 times increased risk of a heart attack or stroke if that level stays high long term. So those are my 3 go-to inflammation markers. Another good one is the microalbumin to creatinine ratio, which is a urine test. Some people are familiar with it, look at it for markers of kidney damage. But if your microalbumin to creatinine ratio is elevated, that means you're starting to leak protein into your urine. That means that the arteries to your kidneys are potentially getting damaged. If your arteries to your kidneys are getting damaged, there's more risk that the arteries to your heart are being damaged as well, and you're more at risk for cardiovascular disease. It's a marker of your endothelial function. The endothelium is the inner lining of your blood vessels. If the endothelium gets damaged, that's the first marker of heart disease. And then another good one to really check is your fasting insulin levels, your fasting glucose levels, and then a test called the hemoglobin A1C, which is a 90-day average blood sugar test. That tells you how well you're able to regulate your blood sugar. Are you developing insulin resistance? Because insulin resistance, or the metabolic syndrome, is a major contributor to early cardiovascular disease.
Awesome information. Okay. So can we, usually I was just reading like another article about cholesterol, because it seems like, cholesterol is the big enemy, and this is something that we need to push down at, any cost. And even if all your hormones are made from cholesterol, we still need to do it because it's a huge risk for heart disease. What's the story with cholesterol?
Sure. Well, that's, what people tend to think of, I have high cholesterol, I'm going to get heart disease. But what most people may not realize, that the majority of the cholesterol is actually made in your system. Your liver makes cholesterol. So, your cholesterol by itself isn't something that's to be feared. It's really only when the cholesterol gets oxidized or damaged do you tend to form plaques in your arteries. So cholesterol is this waxy substance that your body uses for many purposes. As you already mentioned, it's one of the major building blocks for your hormones. It helps make bile acids, which helps digest your fats, and it's also very important for making your cellular membranes. So without cholesterol, you're not going to be around. But the key is looking at, are you oxidizing or damaging your cholesterol? And there's blood tests that can help you determine that. Most patients are familiar with total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides. But there's more sensitive markers where you can look at the particle number and the particle size for the cholesterol. So cholesterol is like oil and vinegar. It doesn't float in the bloodstream by itself. So it needs these particles, which I frequently describe to patients as cars, to drive the cholesterol to the cells so the cells can use the cholesterol. And then there's HDL, which basically is like a recycling truck, picks up the cholesterol from the cells, takes it back to the liver to be recycled. So you can monitor with blood work the number of particles that you have, because it's really the particles that predict risk. And then there's secondarily the size of the particles. So you can have real small particles, which are more likely to get oxidized and damaged and more likely to damage your arteries, or you have big fluffy particles, which are less likely to damage your arteries.
Okay. So what if, if somebody has like a very high cholesterol level, what should they then do? Or is it even like important to do something about it? Or if you just want to lower your cholesterol level, what's the action plan?
Sure. So first thing is figure out, is there a secondary reason why their cholesterol is elevated? There's a genetic abnormality called familial hyperlipidemia syndrome, where you don't make the LDL receptor effectively. So tell patients the LDL receptor is like a catcher's mitt that's sitting there kind of pulling the cholesterol out of the system. If you don't make that receptor, you can't really clear the cholesterol from your system. And it's not the cholesterol that's the problem, but if you have much more cholesterol than your body needs, there's just more risk that cholesterol will be damaged by oxidation. So the issue is that you want to see if there's another reason why the cholesterol is high. I mentioned if it's genetic, okay, but it can also be due to thyroid abnormalities. If you have an underactive thyroid, you may have higher cholesterol. If you have a raging infection going on, your cholesterol may be elevated because cholesterol is part of the immune system. So there's things you can check with advanced blood work that tells you, is the cholesterol being raised for a secondary reason?
So, okay, but eating cholesterol doesn't really affect any of your cholesterol levels, or does it?
It may affect it a little bit, but it's a somewhat self-regulating process that if you eat excessive amounts of cholesterol, your body will just make less of it. If you eat, quote, zero cholesterol, your body will make as much as it needs from the other building blocks that you get in your nutrition. So dietary cholesterol generally is not a problem for patients.
So what are the dietary problems? What's the wrong diet and what's the right diet?
That's a little bit of a loaded question. There's no perfect diet for every single person. And I've learned a little bit of this from Dr. Cruz's information, is that it's much more important to know your mitochondrial function, your mitochondrial haplotype, where your original people came from, and then what your current environment is will dictate what your nutrition plan should be for optimal. But you don't have to get really advanced in your nutrition. It just don't eat a lot of processed junk food and try to eat stuff that's more local and more in season. And Dr. Cruz's famous saying is, you don't have to teach, hippos and lions what they need to eat. So humans sometimes overthink it. They over-engineer their food, and then they tend to get into trouble when they try to outsmart Mother Nature.
And you mentioned that you are actually, much more worried about the toxic light situation. So what is toxic light? What is a good light? What's a bad light?
Yeah, sure. So I fancy myself as advanced in the knowledge, but not an expert. But I think, if you get your lighting environment right, then a lot of the other things will fall into place. So it's your circadian biology, how you relate to the sunrise and the sunset, helps determine how your body's going to make certain hormones. So I agree, patients should try to get some morning sunlight to help set their circadian clock in the morning. And then when they're inside, especially when they're using technology or under a bunch of artificial lights, they should try to protect their eyes from the artificial lights that will impact their hormones. So it's typically, anytime somebody's using the technology, but especially once the sun sets, if they protect their eyes with these blue blocking type lenses, their hormone levels tend to be more optimized, and then they tend to sleep better. And I've really, in the past 6 months, been focusing more on patient sleep. It's already known in general cardiology that sleep is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease from the aspect of sleep apnea. But if you focus on improving patients' quality of sleep, that's when they restore their mitochondria. If you make your mitochondria more efficient, you have more energy, you tend to have less inflammation. So I'm focusing much more on patients' sleep quality right now than even their nutrition or their exercise. If they get their sleep right, then we can focus on the other things afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And so I mentioned those 4 things that I, found to be working for me. what do you recommend to your patients to do in order to make their sleep better?
Sure. So the first thing is, control the light environment. So especially once the sun sets, try to minimize the artificial lights in your house. If you actually saw my living room right now, it sort of looks like a submarine. I got, red light bulbs at night and, Himalayan salt lamps. So I tend not to use my overhead lights in the evening time. Try to wind down any like really mentally taxing, information an hour or two before bed. And then have a sleep cave where you can go recover at night. So a very dark bedroom, temperature ideally 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Try to have it as dark as possible. Ideally, you shouldn't be able to see your hand in front of your face. And try to have it as technology free as possible. Many people use their cell phones as an alarm clock, and I can say I was guilty of that for a long time. But if you're going to use your cell phone as an alarm clock, try to have it in airplane mode so that you're not being irradiated by your cell phone at night, or have your cell phone 10, 15 feet away from your bed, put it on a nightstand somewhere else so it's not sitting right by your head, because the cell phone radiation may impact your sleep quality.
Yeah, that's true. I've been actually trying to install like a kill switch in our house. I still haven't been able to do that. We're negotiating that with my partner, and she's like, "Oh, we're having a baby. We can't kill the electricity in our room." But I'll figure it out somehow. I'm gonna do it. So what are some other lifestyle choices that play a role in heart disease? What are bad choices?
Bad choices is anything that goes against Mother Nature. So, the more people can be outside and be like a wild animal, like you're theoretically supposed to be, the better you tend to do. So, my job takes me inside for the most of the day, and I'm in front of a computer 8 hours a day. But when I can, I try to get outside, get some sunlight, ideally try to get my shoes off and do some grounding if I can. But I think if people focus on 4 things, the risk of heart disease tends to go down. So number 1, focus on the sleep. 2, focus on what you're fueling your body with. Then figure out, how's the best way to move your body. For most people, just start with walking, just be active. You don't have to be a marathon runner, and maybe marathon running isn't actually all that healthy from a cardiovascular standpoint. It's a skill that many people develop, but to think you have to be a marathon runner to have good cardiovascular health is a misnomer. And then probably the 4th thing that's very important is your stress relieving techniques. So, stress is ubiquitous in your environment, but how you respond to it really determines how your cardiovascular system responds. So if you have a lot of stress in your life, you raise your cortisol levels, you raise your blood sugar, you raise your inflammation. So for stress relief, what I personally do, I personally meditate most mornings. I also do some heart rate variability training with the heart math device. But I frequently teach patients these kind of simple things that they can do at home to help mitigate their stress.
And running for 2 hours is not very good for your heart, is it?
It's probably not the best thing for you, and I can tell you that once I got out of the military, my days of long distance running were over. But for cardiovascular health, if somebody is a complete couch potato, never did exercise, no, they're not going to go out there and do high intensity interval training to start with. Just start walking initially. But for the patients who are a little bit younger, a little bit more physically active to begin with, yes, interval training where you have your heart rate be relatively slow with a low intensity, and then you go as hard as you possibly can for 20 seconds, 60 seconds, get your heart rate up, and then let it recover back down to a more physiologic rate before you push it back up, tends to be better for the cardiovascular conditioning. But then many patients will do the cardio, but strength training is really an important thing as well. So the more strength training that you do that helps stimulate your muscles, the better your insulin sensitivity tends to be. And the more muscle mass you have, the better your metabolism is. You tend to have a better energy metabolism when you have more muscle mass, and you tend to not thin out your bones later. You tend to not to get fractures as you age. because one of the best markers of longevity is how much muscle mass you're able to maintain.
Okay, and you don't really, well, you said that, carbs, processed foods, and this kind of foods are not very good. But what should I still didn't get from you. What should a person eat to be healthy?
It's going to be dependent on what local environment that person lives in, and then I tend to do the advanced testing first to see what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. If the patient's already insulin resistant, well, then they do need to cut out their processed carbohydrates. They need to control their light environment, especially their toxic blue light environment if they're insulin resistant. And then there's other markers where you can check their omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So are they getting healthy omega-3s in their diet? So if they're deficient, then you tell them, ideally they try to get their omega-3s out through seafood and shellfish. If they don't, then, I'm not a huge proponent of fish oil, but if they're not going to eat it, I think it's better than not having it in their system, because omega-3s are so healthy from an inflammation lowering standpoint, but it also helps stabilize plaque that may be building up in the arteries.
Do you recommend any supplements, if at all? Do you think there are some supplements that might be good if people are deficient in something?
Sure, and I think that's the key word you said is deficient, is that supplements have their role, but they are supplemental to what you're putting in your body through your nutrition plan. So there's many biomarkers that you can check to see if people are deficient, and then if they're deficient, then replete them back into more optimal ranges. But it's always going to be best to try to get it through more natural sources when possible. But there are many things where you can supplement to help improve function. Some of the supplements I'll frequently recommend are omega-3 supplementation, magnesium, CoQ10, vitamin D. Those are probably the top 4 things that I routinely will recommend to many cardiovascular patients.
Okay, so let's get to the biohacking.
Sure.
So what is biohacking in your opinion?
So biohacking, I look at it as more of a way to do self-experimentation to get yourself to an optimal state. My day job is, taking care of people who are sick and trying to prevent them from being more sick. But biohacking, I look at it as, something that you can do to make yourself more optimal. You use data to kind of track your results, and you can also just know how you feel. There's things that I've done where, I've done bulletproof coffee before and noticed, okay, you have more mental clarity in the morning. Okay, so fats for breakfast is more beneficial for me. Is it beneficial for everybody? You can't give a blanket statement like that, so you ask the patients, try stuff that doesn't seem crazy or dangerous. If you feel better, you keep doing it. I think biohacking is a tool that can be used to get yourself to peak performance. And if you really know what you're doing, you can do what you did, is you can potentially reverse a disease that isn't something that modern medicine thinks you can reverse.
Well, I think I'm about 90% there. I still wanna come to the States, and I wanna do a stem cell treatment to see if I can get rid of the last things that are affecting me. But yeah, I was terrible. I was doing very, very bad. I couldn't see, I couldn't walk, I didn't have any sensitivity on my skin, I was depressed, but it's a long story. But yeah, I think sometimes you just, sometimes, I think most of the times, people who know better, they do better, and sometimes you just have to take the responsibility for your life, for your health, for your money, for your thoughts, for your happiness. So I think biohacking is a part of that. So you can always blame somebody, or you can always find somebody who's guilty in your position or situation, but all in all, it comes down to what can you do about it. So this is what I did. I was like, okay, so here's the situation, here's what I have. Maybe I was lucky that I wasn't I didn't actually. I got sick in the States, but my doctors weren't pushing the latest treatments or medicines that were available. Actually, there was like, it was called, can't remember the name, but it was like super dangerous. Actually, later they figured that you can get like a PML, something called PML, like a brain disease from that, and this is like non-reversible, and some people died and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think there are like, it's like, you're taking like some sort of risk. You're always risking because you're testing something, but if it's like calculated, and if it's if the risk benefit ratio is correct, then I think it's justified, and it's something that it's a good effort. If you educate yourself just a little bit, you don't need to like be super smart about heart disease like you are, but if you just just learn a little bit yourself, and you pay attention to your body, then the outcome is amazing. You can do amazing things, and so this is something that you just, the benefit is just so much bigger. So that's my opinion. But what are the, like, have you done anything crazy? Because I have hurt myself. I think the worst thing was when I went completely ketogenic. I was eating only pretty much fats. And then I was also doing a lot of cold. I was doing it like crazy. I went to a farm, a house, which is like completely secluded. I was staying there. I had a plan to be there for 1 month, and I was just like eating a lot of fish, and that was pretty much it. And then it was winter here in Estonia. It's super cold, and I went outside. I had like a bucket of water. Then I just poured the water on me, and I was like completely cold for this whole month, and that actually got me worse. Luckily, I stopped it, and I just I had enough sense in my head to like put the stop on this, and then I came back, but I learned a very valuable lesson from that. I think if you are somewhere alone without any human connection for a month, in my case, and you have some like dark thoughts in your head. You're battling with a disease that's trying to eat you up, let's put it that way, and it's like a dark passenger, and then you are like all alone, and like trying to, you think that the whole world is stupid. They don't know how to fix you. They don't know how to help you. You just need to do it on yourself, and then you make some foolish assumptions, and I have this mentality to always do one more. If somebody tells me to like do 20 push-ups, then I usually do 21, or maybe like push it to 30, or whatever. Take like one pill of this supplement, then I usually take 2. and with this cold, I think I did the same mistake. I made the same mistake. I just I did it too much. I hurt my joints, and I wrecked my sleep, and yeah. So, but then I came back home, and I was able to recover from that, so it wasn't too bad. So my long story now. What I wanted to ask you was that do you think like that mental, like you mentioned stress, but do you think like just being alone and like away from everybody, and like very very secluded, and not sharing your thoughts or emotions or whatever, and can that be a cause of a heart problem?
Sure. There's definitely data on patients that have less social support have worse outcomes after heart attacks. Humans are social beings by nature, and I agree that there may be some time where you need to be alone to do some deep thinking, but if you're isolated for long periods of time without human contact, you'll tend to go crazy, for lack of a better word. So I think we tend to perform best when we're in the company of others. I mean, we started out the podcast talking about we met at this networking event, and that's where a lot of like-minded people get together and discuss their worldly adventures and their day jobs and their things that most interest them. But when you get in a group of like-minded people, you just feel more energized and you feel like, okay, I can better myself as well. So I think that's one of the major things that biohacking and it can help with is that if you improve yourself, you get to spend around you get to have more time on this earth to spend with interesting people and do interesting things.
One more question that I wanted to ask about sleep. Do you think that if a person, well, I'm asking because of a very close person of mine, not my girlfriend, is snoring, could that be a bad thing or should the person fix it or not? Try to fix the snoring problem.
Sure. So snoring can be a sign of sleep apnea, where you stop breathing while you're sleeping. The more times that happens in an hour, the worse it tends to be for you. So when you have apnea, you become hypoxic. So you have low oxygen levels in your blood. And with low oxygen in your blood, you don't tend to make energy as well in your cells. So it's something that can cause heart disease, but can cause many issues with brain function as well. So if you have a partner or friend that snores a lot, and they say they sleep for 8 hours a night, but they wake up and they don't feel rested, or they feel like they got to take a nap the next day, then yes, they definitely should consider getting a sleep study. And now there's ways that you can do sleep studies in your own home that are fairly sensitive at picking up sleep apnea. And if you have sleep apnea, getting it treated tends to improve your sleep quality, which then tends to improve your general health.
Okay, I will try to convince him. It's gonna take some convincing to get him to go to a doctor, but he has a heart problem. So I'm gonna now print all the biomarkers that you talked about, and I'm gonna go to the lab and ask them to get those labs done, and then we'll see. But the advice is, I think, pretty much the same. Doesn't really. Well, it matters, if the inflammatory markers are high, then we can maybe figure something out, or if the snoring is a problem, then we need to do something about that.
Yeah, if your CRP is high, that's one of the hidden things that can cause the CRP to be high is sleep apnea.
Yeah. So one thing that that I wanted to discuss was, how do you see the future of medicine? Right now, it seems that I was reading the World Health Organization's official data, and they say that about 50% of the people in the world have some sort of chronic disease. And we're trying to reverse it with medication and with the current, practices. It's, in my opinion, it's clear that sooner or even sooner we need some kind of a change in the paradigm. We need to start addressing those problems before they even arise. You mentioned that we should focus on prevention and explaining and lifestyle issues. What's your opinion about that?
Sure. So I think prevention aspect is always going to be the best way at going at things. But I think right now in my reading, I think it's going to be really coming down to the environment. How your environment turns on certain genes in your system is really going to be the key. So focusing on the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell. So if you fix your mitochondria, you tend to fix a lot of cardiovascular issues or other chronic diseases. I think as the technology gets better, the blood markers get better, that can help us actually determine how well your mitochondria are functioning. That'll be the focus in the future. The data from Dr. Doug Wallace is that maybe 85% of disease is based off of something going wrong in one of your mitochondria, and that maybe it's only 10 or 15% a true genetic issue. So if you control the environment that your mitochondria sense, then you tend to not have as many issues.
Maybe somebody from the audience doesn't know, what is mitochondria?
Sure. So the mitochondria are the organelles inside of all your cells. And the mitochondria, is one of their main jobs is they're the powerhouses of the cells. They help make ATP, which is one of the energy currencies for the body. So the mitochondria make the energy. They provide it to the cells to use for the other chemical processes that need to go on in the body. The long story is the mitochondria used to be a freestanding bacteria that our cells kind of usurped up to use. Can't remember exactly how many hundreds of thousands of years ago, but our body became symbiotic with the mitochondria, and the mitochondria really call a lot of the shots. So if you focus on helping the mitochondria sense the environment appropriately, then you tend to do better as well.
And heart is a place where, heart, lungs, and brain have the most mitochondria in human body, right? So if the mitochondria in your heart are working well, then your heart seems to be doing well most of the time. Actually, I really like how Doug Wallace explains it. I can't quote it, but it was something like, if you take ATP or the mitochondrial function away from the body, we become very rigid and we call it dead. So this is something that's, I think, is not very well it's being researched right now, but doesn't get as much attention as it should. I think actually now it's last, I think 3, 4 or 5 years it's been like it's been getting more attention, but yeah, it's awesome that now we are learning about that as well. And it has a lot to do, I think, with Chinese medicine and all the other aspects. How you mentioned that you go grounding. What do you mean? Like you just take your shoes off and you go outdoors and you like stand on the ground, or what do you mean? Why is it necessary? But yeah, if you start to learn about mitochondria and like the charges and electron transport chain, and then you begin to understand why it might be a good idea to go outside and put your feet to the ground, and then you might actually understand why it feels so good if you go to the beach and you just take your shoes off, and then all of a sudden you feel so much better.
The craziest biohack I done was probably loading with carnitine. Carnitine is used by a lot of the weightlifters to get the pump up in their muscles. So I just had an extra bottle lying around, and I was just like, well, it's supposed to help with energy production in mitochondria. Like I'm gonna load up on 10 grams a day, like you're supposed to for a week. But by like day 3, all of a sudden I was like, man, I have this like really intense burning sensation in my back that's shooting around my side. I'm like, this is weird. And then I eventually realized, oh man, I gave myself shingles. Shingles is the reactivation of the chickenpox virus. So I quickly got on PubMed and some biohacking sites and was trying to figure out, like, can carnitine do this? And there's only one crazy guy on the internet said that, oh yeah, it definitely causes shingles. But apparently if you take too much carnitine, you push up your L-arginine levels too high, and that can reactivate the shingles virus. So I had to resort to my traditional medical training to reverse that problem. So.
Okay. So how was it? Super bad, or was it an easy fix?
I was initially concerned about it because this is like a disorder of like elderly people, and there's a risk of having something called post-herpetic neuralgia, where even though the rash goes away, you continue to have this intense burning pain. I won't say the pain was ever 10 out of 10, but it was enough that when you're put your seatbelt on the car, you're like, man, that really is irritating. And I was hoping that wasn't going to be going on for the rest of my life. But fortunately, after about a week or so, taking the traditional medications, everything healed up just fine.
Yeah. 2 days ago, I was just reading about a Finnish guy who was using a lot of steroids to get to the best, shape of his life and to win the Mr. Olympics and so on. And now he's, I think it was something maybe 40s or 30, I think some like 48 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And his kidneys are totally like whacked, and he can't, I think, he's doing really bad. So, I mean, bodybuilders have been the first biohackers, I think, because they've been using a lot of things on their own and without, having a lot of common sense. Because, we've been talking about biohacking, but I think, biohacking actually can go wrong if you don't really know what you're doing, especially I think right now people seem to go crazy with all kinds of gadgets like pulsed electromagnetic devices and all kinds of light devices even, and so on, and they don't really have the time or sometimes I hate to say that, but sometimes you don't even have the brain capacity or enough intelligence, because, and I'm the one to blame, because once you have this brain fog and you don't really, and you're like really want to get out of the situation that you are in. Maybe you have like pain and you're suffering and you want to do something about it, and that's I've been also doing a lot of I've been watching some documentaries, and I'm reading a book about stem cells and stem cell therapies. And for MS there's a procedure that you can do. It's called HSCT. And what they do is they kill your immune system with chemo, and then they restore that your immune system with stem cells. And people just right now in the States there's a huge debate going on about stem cells as well. I'm not now talking about chemo, but also just the usual stem cell treatment. You can suck some fat from your side or from your belly or whatever, and then they can filter out the stem cells, and then they can just put an IV on you, or you can inject those stem cells wherever you want. My opinion right now is that it should be regulated, probably not by the FDA, because the drug component there is just not existent. I think the medical board of the states should regulate that. Right now it seems that you can go to the States and you can do whatever. You can just they do all kinds of things. I had a very close friend who was actually a victim, I believe, I'm not sure, but from this bad treatment from a stem cell clinic. It wasn't in the States. So I think it should be regulated, because it's always, laws are there to protect the ones that are weaker. And once you're sick and you start to climb out from the hole that you're in, you might make pretty bad mistakes. The same thing with biohacking. It's awesome that you can take the responsibility for your own health. But I don't even know how to solve that, because every person has the right to do whatever they want with their body, in my opinion. But what we should also protect the ones that are weaker, or who maybe, who wouldn't do this decision if they were healthy, or if they were like under some very tremendous pressure. So there's a fine line, or what do you think?
No, I definitely agree. I mean, when somebody's really sick, they'll frequently do almost anything to get better, and there may be more, low dopamine at that state, and they're not making good decisions. So that's the challenge, is finding your mentors, your physicians, the people that can kind of help guide you back to health. And it's, trying to find an expert that you resonate with, that you understand, what their focus is. If somebody's just, saying you got to take this medicine, you got to do this procedure to get better, well, that's maybe not somebody you absolutely want to take all your advice from. If that person's more talking about, what are your wishes? What do you want to do with your life? What are you willing to try? What are the risk benefits? Then that person, is more of your advocate and kind of help you get back on the road to recovery, because, your health is, your best asset, and it's something that each patient is in control of. They may not feel that they're in control of it, but it's ultimately their responsibility. Your physicians aren't responsible for your health. They're there for your information. They've had many years of training and had other experiences that can help you, but it's ultimately for the patient to make the decisions what's in their best interest.
Let's try to wrap it up now. So what would be the 3 main things that you would recommend to have a healthy, happy, and a productive life?
Sure. I'd say number 1 would be listen to Mother Nature. Be more of an outside animal instead of an inside animal. 2, invest in your health, because it's your best asset. Without your health, you can't do what you want to do in your life. And 3, invest in your friends and family, your network of people, your tribe. Those are the people who are going to get you through your hard times.
Your network is your net worth, right?